Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today, celebrating International Women's Day. Our theme for International Women's Day is accelerating action for women's equality. I have a great panel of guests with me today as we're going to have our discussion. And so if you would, I would just like to kind of go around the panel and briefly, if you introduce yourself. So, I'm Tara Anderson. I'm the Vice President of Customer Success with Newforma. And then Sarah.
Hi, my name is Sarah Treas, and I am the Senior Document Control Specialist at HNTB.
Thank you. Susan?
Susan Koenigs, the Director of Digital Practices at Affiliated Engineers.
Thank you. Karen?
Hi, I'm Karen Delgado, the Director of Learning and Knowledge at Colliers Engineering and Design.
Thank you. Trish?
Hi, I'm Trish Buzan. I recently retired, but I had 35 years in the industry and 34 of those as the CIO and principal at NAC Architecture.
Thank you. And Michelle?
I'm Michelle Tremblay. I'm a senior project coordinator with HDR, and I work out of the San Antonio office. And I started my life as an electrical engineer many moons ago. So.
Excellent. Well, thank you again, ladies. I really appreciate you joining me today. So we're going to kick off, and Susan, I'm gonna come to you because I know you've had a long career in this industry as well. So what strategies have you used throughout your career to really accelerate, innovation and diversity within the organizations you worked for?
I have a mantra that my teams share with me, and it's people, process, culture, and technology. And it's a little prosaic, but we break it down into making sure that we have the right people at the right time, doing the right things for the right reasons. So it ends up being our base strategy for almost everything that we do. So for instance, we make sure that, or I make sure, and my managers make sure that our teams are diverse in the industry as well as outside of the industry. It's always really interesting to have people who have not practiced as architects or engineers, but who've worked for finance or corporations to be involved in conversations because we all have similar problems. So essentially making sure that there's a variety level of experiences and expertise, because solving problems isn't just about what you've done in the past, but it's the way you look at things in the future. I also like to make sure that my team members are not limited to a particular path. In the world today, you have to be thinking in terms of flexibility because there's always new technology, new ways of doing things, opportunities, but also our staff members are always experiencing life changes, and the personalities are different, and their skill sets and their desires are different. So making sure that any team member has that flexibility and has the opportunity to be whatever they want to be within our group. And as I mentioned before, gathering people from atypical groups, and that includes other people or teams within a company that show a spark, because that's what I'm always looking for in order to do all the things that we were talking about.
Excellent. Very, very good. And Susan, was there, you talked about different people from different areas, and is there any pivotal moment or pivotal time or event in your career that really helped you overcome a challenge that you had?
I actually think back to one of my first jobs as an architect, and I worked for a minority-owned firm. And one of the things that we did, and it was a very diverse environment and a very diverse workforce, but one of the things that we did, we had a lot of volunteer opportunities, and one of them was going into at-risk middle schools in the Seattle neighborhoods, and talking to the middle school kids about the opportunities in architecture and engineering. And that sounds probably a little bit unrelated, but remembering that experience and the process of explaining this completely foreign world to a group of kids that really only knew about becoming maybe a teacher or becoming maybe a lawyer, or the basic things that you could become, it was really pivotal for me because I had to learn to communicate about something that I understood because I had recently experienced it, but certainly they would never understand if we weren't there. And so I apply that now whenever I overcome a challenge because the process of collaborating and communicating, the process of sitting down and understanding where people are at, and then making sure that you can move forward from it always comes from assuming that you're both approaching it from a different place.
And I'd love to open up that question to the whole panel, just as far as overcoming challenges that you've had in your career.
I would like to speak to that if that's okay. So I think there's a challenge, especially whenever you're in construction. I have this happen on every project that I start. Those first couple times that you're on site for construction meeting and just having that feeling that everyone's you're meek and nescient and like just as a woman, you're not taken seriously. So having to kind of be more confident and hold your ground and prove that you're capable and you are knowledgeable. That just always seems to happen on my projects. And during the first few construction meetings of a project, I always, whenever I go on site or go on the into the trailer for the first time, I always have that feeling that all the male counterparts kind of look at me like I'm meek and unknowledgeable. And so that overcoming that challenge by speaking more confidently and more knowledgeable and just trying to be taken seriously through showing that proving my work through my work that I'm capable.
Very good. Is there anyone else that would like to speak, to share any of your ways that you overcome challenges in your career? Okay. Well, we will move on. So we all work with a lot of technology. So how do you see, and Michelle, I'm going to direct this one to you initially. How do you see technology really transforming the AECO industry? And what unique opportunities do you think that technology might bring for women?
Well, I think the digital tools that we have now, and the remote collaboration lends itself much better for women to be able to get themselves involved, to educate themselves on these, because we're all kind of at the same place at the moment. This is not a typically male area. This is a new technology. So women can just jump right in there, learn all of this stuff at the same time, and be just as knowledgeable as their male counterparts. So, but by embracing this emerging technology, I think that's going to help women a lot more than trying to be good at the stuff that's already known, already done. You know, this is an opportunity for us to excel.
Excellent. Is there anyone else that would like to weigh in on that conversation?
I do think that with the emergence of AI, that we're all going to be working differently over the next couple of decades. And as the Director of Learning and Knowledge, I really do feel a responsibility to make sure that our team will be reskilled for those positions that are going forward.
And I'm just curious, what types of, have you figured out what types of skills that you see are going to need to be different?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with just change management overall. I think that people are used to doing things a different way, and you need to open your mind to what the new technologies are be. I don't think we even know 1/10 of what's going to be out there. I think people are starting to dabble in productivity tools, and what they can imagine, that's what they're looking at, but we haven't gotten to what we can imagine yet. And so more and more when I go to conferences, I hear new innovative ideas, and wherever I can, I try to bring those back. And we're starting to, work on some of that ourselves, but we don't know what we don't know yet. And I do think Michelle is exactly right that, there is all sorts of opportunities, and there's going to be a level playing field based on what's coming down the road.
first started, I started as, we were hand drafting, and I came to work for NAC Architecture because they were one of two firms that were committed to moving to computer-aided drafting. And by embracing those changes, and a desire to learn, a curiosity to learn, then I became the person people came to with their questions about the new technology. And so that led to being the first at a number of things at NAC Architecture. And I think if young women can embrace new technologies, it's an opportunity for them to lead the way and be recognized as leaders within their firm. And the rate of change is a little scary right now, but it's going to provide so many opportunities, and I think we need to look at it that way.
No, that's great, Trish, and again, you've had such a phenomenal career, and we thank you for that and congratulate you on your next adventures. But kind of going back to that question, though, Trish, to you, as a leader in an organization, or as even a coach or a mentor, how can we encourage young women to really take those chances, or to accelerate their own innovation?
Yeah, I think, it kind of goes back to what Susan was saying, having diversity on your team, looking for that spark, right? That someone has an interest or a passion in something that's new or innovative, and support that. And they may not see where that can take them. And I think that's where we can, as leaders, we can help acknowledge that, recognize it, and support that, and give them suggestions for how they can move that particular spark and idea forward. So I think that's where we can, as leaders. I think in sharing stories, I think storytelling is hugely important. And if we can tell them a story about how when we had a spark and we had an idea, and that what that led to, then that can help them feel more confident about moving that idea forward.
Does anyone else have any maybe examples of that spark, or that time, or something in your career that you'd like to share?
I think I wanted to add, after listening to everybody here, one of the key opportunities for women is that we're all very collaborative and communicative, and new technology is awfully confusing and frustrating for everybody. And the ability to be able to explain that to anyone is a very ripe opportunity. And as we pointed out, no one knows anything about what's coming. So being able to embrace it and share it and bring people along is going to be huge for a lot of women.
Absolutely. So one of the questions that I know that we've received, even in some of the other panels that we've done in a live audience, was a gentleman stood up and asked, well, how could he help? How can we suggest that men can help to advance women and accelerate women in this industry? So Sarah, I'll direct this at you first, but everyone, of course, is please speak up if you have other things to add.
Yeah, I think when it comes to men playing a stronger role, just treat us the same. Treat us the same as our male counterparts. Encourage women to pursue leadership roles. See women for the quality of work, not their gender. And then I think too, just they should see firsthand kind of the differences that women face. And I think a good example of that is if there's a situation where they can do a site walk with a woman, that will show you that. Just be aware of the reactions that a woman receives during that time. And we don't want your pity, we don't want your sympathy, but we want your support. Just treat us the same, that will make us feel comfortable.
Very good.
I was sort of thinking something along similar lines. I think if men could work to be more observant, whether it's in a group discussion or on a job site, whatever that environment is, learn to be an observer and not just maybe what's happening in the moment, but also in processing that, how that might be impacting different people on the team. I was really lucky to work with a really good CFO who was a man, and he would notice in meetings if I wasn't speaking up or if something really bothered me. And he would come by, he would make it a point to come by after that meeting and ask me about it. And in one respect, it just showed me that he cared, and that always helps with your confidence in those meetings when you know somebody in the room cares, right? But it also helped me learn to articulate things because I could do that in a one-on-one position before articulating it to a room full of people. So both those were helpful to me.
I would love to add, as a man, don't assume anything. I recently had an experience where we had a bunch of consulting firms respond to an RFP, and one particular consulting group, even though we all introduced ourselves, spoke directly to my IT manager. All of his presentation was directed at the young man who looked like he was the boss or something. But it was an interesting experience, and obviously my IT manager was like, "You need to be talking to her," and the man was properly mortified. But it was a matter of don't assume. It's just if I'm quiet or if I communicate differently or any of that, it doesn't mean that I am not the person you should be talking about or to, and I'm not the authority. Walk in the door, as other people suggested. Look at the people that you're working with or talking to, understand them, and then communicate appropriately.
I would like to respond to what Trish said too. I love hearing that your CFO didn't speak for you in the meeting or ask you to speak. That would have made me feel so uncomfortable. The fact that he approached you after those meetings just shows a level of respect that I really appreciate. It's so wonderful to hear.
What Sarah said about not trying to fix it, I do think that our male counterparts do tend to try to be fixers, and there isn't necessarily things to fix. Just let things be, just support. You don't have to fix it for me. I can fix it for myself. Just be there next to me. You don't have to be there in front of me.
Yeah, I agree. But if you can't be observant as a man and be as kind as your CFO was, then at the very least make it obvious or make sure that we know that we can come to you and talk to you about these things. Leave that communication door open, and don't assume just because there's a woman at the table that she's there to take the minutes. That's
Again,
one of my
back to the assumption.
Work at the coffee.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
Sounds like, Michelle, you may have had some experience in that.
More than once.
So what, if I may, what for others and for other women out there that have had that experience and it was very demotivating for them, what would you say to them, Michelle, as to how to get through that?
Oh, I blatantly ignored it. And if somebody asked me, "Are you taking minutes?" I would just say, "No, I assumed somebody else was, because I'm actually here to talk, not to listen." So.
Any other?
You would think that the steel-toed work boots and the toolkit would have been enough of a clue, but clearly not. So, but anyway.
I think it depends on the situation. I was at a dinner, a professional dinner, but spouses were invited, and I sat down next to a man who was a sales rep, and he assumed I was a wife, and he moved so he could talk to people. He moved tables so he could talk to people about his product. And so I just made it a point afterwards to go up to him and introduce myself because, maybe I was wrong, but it very much felt like that was his assumption, that I was a wife of somebody there, and that's not who he wanted to sit by at dinner. And so I just, if I made a wrong assumption, that's fine, no harm done. But if I made a right assumption, I hope he got the message.
Well, I'm sure he did.
That mistake next time he asks.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And I love that you didn't, there wasn't anger there. It wasn't, why did you move? It was just a very high, I'm the CIO. Nice to meet you. Just a total mature and professional approach at that.
I want to add to that story a little bit, because as I recall, the other part he was missing was that Trish was one of the board members of the group that was holding the dinner. So he was more than just a client.
Wow. So yeah, good lesson. I guess probably for everyone always about those assumptions, right? Definitely. So let's talk about other actions that we can do, or even maybe that our companies can do. So Karen, I just was going to ask you, what is something that we can go, and some things that I know also you've experienced and participate in that can really help women, even minorities, others get involved in this industry who may not be today?
My firm is very active in different programs that work with high school students, that work with college students, across the board. So there's an organization in New Jersey called Junior Achievement, where they have panels of architects and engineers go out and meet with the students. First, there's a Q&A, and then there's a luncheon, and then you actually sit down and you work on a project together, and you kind of answer even more questions individually. We're involved. We're actually going to host a job shadowing event at our office. So there'll be a smaller group of people, and they'll get to see what the different types of possible career choices that they could have. And then getting involved with college students, and being at the different not only career fairs, but actually partnering with different universities to help provide interviewing skills and other things to really give back to the community, because there are just not enough architects and engineers out there for any of us to even begin to start hiring. Like Susan said, we need to be out there letting them know that this career is even a possibility.
And does anyone have any ideas? I don't know if your other firms are doing this, but other ways to break into that, I guess, and how you can have an impact in your community potentially. Because if I'm sitting there listening, going, "Oh, I don't think our company has something like that," and what could they do to make that first move?
Certainly, if there are professional organizations in your city, even asking the question about whether that's something they're willing to do or they already do. Certainly, Seattle has some programs for architecture and engineering in the high schools. I would prefer that there was more outreach in the minority schools, but I'm certainly happy that they are doing it and that some of the people who are attending are women. But asking and including yourself in those conversations as well as in those organizations.
Yeah, that's a nice thing about Junior Achievement. It's all women.
Yeah, very good.
I mean, we do other stuff too, but Junior Achievement in particular is all women. And then and of course, I'm going to forget what the name of it is, but there's actually a presentation for elementary school kids where we build a town, and there's actually a little engineering booth, and they get to go through the town, and so that gives a different perspective.
That's excellent. So it sounds like in some of the discussion that we've had, and for the fact that there's International Women's Day, I know that firms are not always are not gender equal in this industry at all. So there are still some barriers there to break. So Michelle, I was just going to ask you, because you said you've been doing this a while and you're an engineer. So what barriers do you think there are there for women today, and how can we help break those down?
Well, in spite of all the progress that we've made, because we have come a long way, I'm no longer the only woman on a job site, which is really refreshing because it was really lonely in the beginning. But gender bias is still an issue, obviously. We've got underrepresentation in leadership, and I think that is one of the big things that stops women from advancing into leadership, by not having that mentor or someone that you can say, well, oh, look, this company that I'm working for has all these female leaders and I can do that too. It's very discouraging when all of the leadership is male, or most of it is male. It seems like an anomaly when there's a woman. Everyone's like, ooh, it shouldn't be that way. We are definitely underrepresented that way. And the pay gaps are really not fair. That's just, will always, always, always be a big pain for me. When the guy that you're working alongside is making 10 grand more than you, and this happened to me when I was living in Hawaii. Two of us took a job, not the same job, obviously, but a job doing the same thing, one guy and me, and he was useless at it. He couldn't get the software right. He was messing up all over the place, and they paid him 10 grand more than me. And this was like 20 years ago. So that was a lot of extra money that he was getting to not do the job, and I was getting less to do the job. So that is always going to be a problem until we can advocate for more fairness in the industry. So in any industry, to be fair.
And if someone that's listening is in that situation, any advice to them on what they should do or what they could do?
Well, my situation was a little difficult, a little different, because I was a military spouse. And so I was only going to be there for a set amount of time. And because my resume had all kinds of holes in it, because we were here, then we were there. So I had to take a new job everywhere we went. So I took that money and thought myself lucky to have a job. But I never did that again. The next time I said, you know what? I bring a skill set that actually has value and I want to be paid appropriately. But the second year I was there, we did our annual review, and they said, well, we're going to give you a 5% raise. I said, no, that's not going to work. We're going to have to bring me up to what he was getting before. Well, that's what he negotiated. I said, and that's what we're doing now. We're negotiating. So that's what you have to do. You have to you have to know your worth and negotiate for yourself. And if they don't want to pay you that one, move on. You don't have to quit, obviously, but know that they're not going to pay you your worth. So,
and I think, sometimes we're not always the best advocates for ourselves. And so it's not necessarily, okay, they're making this and I want to make that. It's, I'm worth this. And this is what I bring to the table. And there was an interesting study where they were talking about, when somebody's looking at a job advertisement, and 60 women look at a job where they're like 95% of those skills, they feel like they're qualified for that position. But men, they can be qualified for 65% and they're applying for that job, no problem. So I think we need to change the mindset. We need to think about what we are worth, and we need to go in there confidently. I remember early on in my career, I didn't ask for it. I did not ask for a raise. And it took me 3 years, and I went in and I practiced for like 2 weeks. I went in, I closed the door behind me, and I sat down, and my boss was like, oh, you want a raise? It's about time you got here. I've been waiting for you. We've been underpaying you for a while. He picked up the phone and asked for 10% more than I was going to ask him for. So I just was not very good about knowing my own worth. And I have not made that mistake again.
That's excellent. As leaders, and Trish, maybe I'll direct this to you first. As leaders in an organization, how do we help women that maybe you see someone, and those women that aren't coming and asking for those raises, or where you see that they need they need someone to advocate for them. How do you help that, and how do you help their confidence so they ask for that?
You don't know. I guess I'm going to speak first, sort of from the perspective of a leader, in what you can do if you are in a position where you have some access. And I think the first thing is talking with your HR department. Are we paying everybody the same for the same role and the same experience? Are we paying them based on the value that they are bringing, and making sure at your company that is actually happening? And when you ask that question, HR knows there's always people who need to be caught up, particularly women who don't advocate. They come in lower than their male counterparts, and then it gets really hard for a company to go, we're going to give them a 25% increase to catch them up. Companies get kind of uncomfortable, I think, with those big jumps, even if they're the right thing to do. And so I think making sure that your company is doing that. And then I think making sure that when you're looking at the value people bring, that you're removing as much bias from that as possible. We've talked earlier about women are really good collaborators, but when we start talking about pay, I don't know that I've ever been in a room where somebody said we should pay that person more because they're a good collaborator. And we work in an industry where people pride themselves on collaboration, but we don't see it as a criteria for more pay or more promotion necessarily. So I think from a company perspective, I think watching from a leadership perspective, watching for those things and pointing those things out. I think also, it ties a little bit to that spark, providing opportunities for women. And when they step into that and they take that chance, even if it's not successful, even if it's a lessons learned, right? As leaders, showing a light on that innovation, that tenacity, that ingenuity, that desire to move forward, and telling that person that you're seeing that in them will help them gain confidence to repeat that behavior, right? And so I think those are things that we can do to help women gain parity.
Well, I have heard many women talk about the struggles sometimes advancing just because of keeping a work-life balance, or trying to have the struggles with family, or balancing everything that goes along with it. So just want to talk a little bit about that, and maybe Sarah, if you'd like to lead out on this, but really, how do you maintain a strong work-life balance? Any advice you have for other women out there?
Yeah, I mean, traditionally, when women, got to stay home and stay home with the children, now we're in this world where women are expected to be superheroes. Like, we're expected to have a full-time job. We're expected to go home and have food on the table. We're still expected, we're expected to raise our children at the same time. Work-life balance is more important than it's ever been. And now, after COVID, where remote working became a huge part of our lives, work-life balance is even more impossible than it was before. So I think from the very beginning, I think the most important thing is just to establish healthy boundaries. And one of those that I do is to not have work on your phone. And I know that's incredibly hard. It's almost impossible. But if you don't have Outlook, don't have Teams, or if you feel like you have to, I know we all have those weeks when we're working 60 hours and we're working towards a deadline. Just at least have those notifications turned off, because I think there's nothing more nothing that can pull you out of that relaxing environment at home than receiving that email that's, oh, well, you have to take care of this. You have to take care of that. It's like, I'm at home with my kid. I'm focusing on that right now because that's the most important thing to me, you know? So turning off those notifications, like being able to have that line, have that boundary set. Because I think if something is so important, they'll reach out a different way. Like, I don't give out my personal cell phone number to very many people. Only a couple people have it. So if somebody really needs to reach out to me, they can. But other than that, I keep that other stuff private. I keep it turned off.
I kind of took a different spin to that. So because I felt like I had to be available via my phone, I utilized it to my own benefit. So I took time during the day and I was class mom. Because if you're going to be able to get me at night, then I am going to take an hour out of my day. I'll, schedule it out. And I drove over and I would participate either in a reading activity or something else with my child. And they were accepting of it because I was willing to work outside of what would be normal office hours. But at the same time, they gave me the opportunity to do some of the other things that other parents couldn't do because they were at work. And so it was a give and take. And I do think I was somewhat of a trailblazer in this at my office. I definitely think more people do this now. My son's 16, so it's been a little while since I was the class mom. But my feeling was, if you're going to find me on a Saturday, or I'm going to have to come in on a Saturday, then you know what? At lunch at 2:00 in the afternoon, I'm going to go over and do reading for his class. So it was sort of a give and take, and they've been fabulous with that.
That's excellent. Other experiences? Absolutely, Susan.
Yeah, there are two things for me. At several jobs ago, I remember starting and the HR director popped in and introduced herself to me, and she said, the one piece of advice that she got years ago was to start your new job as you want to live it. And very specifically, she's like, this is your opportunity to develop this type of framework for yourself that doesn't allow other people to impose themselves on you. So she said, if you want to take calls all the time, then go for it. But that just means to everyone that you're going to take calls. However, if you choose not to, then don't. And they will learn that that is not something within your framework. Now, obviously, on my side, and some of us, when we're in the tech industry and we're doing IT or IT related things, we're also all on call and we're always answering things. And it doesn't matter at that point, female or male. However, as a leader, I feel like it's my responsibility to build in a structure that allows any team member the flexibility to do what they need to do for themselves and for their personal life.
Yes. And I do think that's not always about being a parent, that it's about whatever, my staff wants to do. I mean, it's not fair that it would just be, well, because I'm a mom, I get to go and, take this time. If somebody wants to spend, time, being, volunteering or exercising or something like that, then they should be afforded the same as I get to do because my son has a track meet. So I definitely try to make sure that it's fair across the board and it's more about the value of work they bring to the table and less about the, here exactly at 8:00 and leaving exactly at 5:00. It's a give and take. And it, it doesn't necessarily always work all the time with every position, but where you can be flexible, you have if you value your employees, they're going to value working for you as well.
Yes, I don't have any children, but I walk my dog every lunchtime because I need to get away from, and I did hear you when you were talking, Sarah, so I do push away from the desk, and because they will call me at 7:00 at night and sometimes 6:00 in the morning, but that's my trade-off. You will not get me over lunchtime because I'll be walking my dog. So,
yeah, I think, my story was more similar to Karen's when my kids were growing up. And I think as I, later in my career, I found I had to draw boundaries and don't overcommit. If you commit to something, always follow through, but don't overcommit. Saying no is okay. If you don't, you are your most valuable resource. And if you don't take care of yourself first, you will have nothing to give to others. If that means, for me, Saturday and most of Sunday, I did not check email. And my team knew if something happened, they could text me. They had my number. Friday, hey, I'll talk to you guys later. Text me if something urgent comes up. Drawing some boundaries that help you maintain your own mental, physical, and emotional health is a good thing. You'll have to learn to say no in order to have those boundaries respected. But when you commit to something, you have to follow through. That's the trade-off. And that's kind of with Karen and my experience. I could leave any time of day that I needed to do something with my children or take care of my children. But I was never going to miss a deadline. The work was going to get done, even if I was doing it at 9:00 at night. So it's kind of that balance, and you have to expect also that there's some give and take. And I think if you set the boundaries, like Susan was talking about, this is what I'm going to do, this is what I'm willing to do, and this is how I'm going to do it, then people will respect that as well.
Yeah. And if it's a topic that you don't feel comfortable saying no about, you need to say when. It doesn't have to be on the exact schedule that the other person thinks it is. It's not necessarily about saying no. It's about reframing the question and asking, well, when do you need that?
Right.
Because you'll get a different response.
That's a very good point. It's not necessarily no, it's not this quarter, but I can work on it next quarter. There are strategies around that as well.
No, I think that's wonderful advice. And even asking that question of, of when is this really needed? Because even the person that you're talking to may not have thought it as immediate as you were hearing it. I know that from my experience, and making sure that it's clear on those expectations, but love the boundaries, loving the boundaries. So I know at Newforma and with Newforma Women's Leadership Council, we're in a process of starting a mentoring and a mentorship program, and something a little more official, I guess, and standard. So just wanted to ask your experience with that. And Karen, maybe we'll start with you. Your experience with mentorship programs and being on either side of that relationship.
So we have a formal mentorship program at Colliers Engineering Design. We use a software that actually is almost like a dating app. You put in all your information about what your skills are, and then and then if you're a mentor, and then if you're a mentee, you kind of choose from those skills which skills you're looking to be mentored on, and then they kind of match you. And then our human resources department kind of massages it a little bit. But it's been really good. I have participated for probably a decade now. I've been both a mentor and a mentee, because I think there is always things that you can learn from others. And I try to take at least 2 mentees at a time, because unfortunately everybody's busy, and so we have a lot of mentors, but usually not enough to fill every person who wants one. But I think it's been an important role for me. I know earlier in my career I never had a woman mentor, because there was never a woman to mentor. There just wasn't anybody else in the room. I did have a lot of unofficial mentors that were all men that just saw something in me and wanted to work with me. And I do remember the first person that was a woman that mentored me, and it made me look at things completely different. So I think it's one of our responsibilities to step up and be a mentor, whether it's in an official mentor program or an unofficial mentor program.
Excellent. Would anyone else like to share their experiences with either official or unofficial, or experiences being a mentor or a mentee?
I think one of the things I've seen in in our industry is that we think of mentoring more as knowledge transfer than personal and professional development as people to become leaders in the firm. And so I guess I would just encourage people on both sides to think about mentoring in terms of support and conversation. Both sides have the opportunity to learn something in those conversations and to develop as professionals, develop personally as people, and not just have mentorship be around traditional transfer of knowledge as part of that mentor program.
I would add that it's not something that's one and done. It's a continuous improvement effort, and it's not something you just check off the list. However, you do have to regularly check it off the list. I mean, you have to make a conscious effort to do it.
And if you see somebody that you think may be struggling with a particular something, or I remember there was an engineer, and she was this was at my old firm, and she was the only engineer in the group. And she was so hungry for knowledge that I sat and taught her all the skills that I had for how to be a project manager. And I think as people saw me working with her, then they started giving her additional responsibilities as well. She was just out of school, but I don't think she knew what to ask for. Mm-hmm. And so if you see something in someone, just start talking to them, start these conversations. It doesn't have to be official.
That's great advice. And I was going to ask if someone doesn't have that official kind of program at their firm, but they would like the help. So kind of the other, Karen, you're saying if you see someone that sort of needs the help, but if you're on the other side of that, any advice for who they could go to or the type of person or relationship they might look to if they're looking for a mentor, but there isn't really an official program in place?
I don't know if it's so much looking for a mentor, but I've sort of always approached things. You can learn something from everybody, right? Mm-hmm. And what I found in my career is I would observe leaders in say interviewing new hires. So when I first started interviewing new hires, I was paired with somebody who had years of experience, and I found it very interesting to watch him. He would ask very unique questions, and even in meetings, the same person would ask a question that I knew he knew the answer to draw people out, to get people engaged in the conversation. And it was something I observed, and I always wished that I had gone to him and asked him about that and asked him where he learned that from. But as I started to adopt that I found, wow, this really does work. So I always wished I sort of had that conversation with him. So I think if you see somebody doing something that's sort of a little different, a little unique, but it's getting that result, ask them about it. I mean, people don't mind being asked about, why did you do it that way or approach it that way? Like, tell me about that. I find that really interesting that people will take time to talk to you. So be an observer yourself and ask questions.
That's great advice. Any other thoughts? Well, then to round us out and to finish us up on the celebration of International Women's Day, I'd just like to ask you if there was, one piece of advice that you could give to women in this industry to really help them accelerate their success. What would it be?
I would say just be confident. Use your voice and be confident.
Be your own advocate.
And advocate for yourself. that's what you have to do. You have to advocate for yourself, but it's good to have a strong network of people you can also advocate for, and speak up in meetings and amplify other women's voices. Credit where credit's due.
Karen?
Uh,
Nope. Sorry.
look for the opportunities. You know, opportunities are not always going to fall into your lap. Be observant and look for those opportunities that you can make yourself part of.
And for
Susan?
me, it's find your people, and
Uh,
they don't have to be other women, but just to build a community if you're looking for it. And you'd be surprised how long those communities last. Trish and I have known our communities for decades, and it's formed our careers.
that's wonderful.
I think that the most pivotal thing probably in my career, it makes me think of, people say they're waiting for their ship to come in, but there's some people who walk to the end of the dock and look for that ship, and there's some people who stay on shore, right? And walking to the end of the dock for me is what Karen's, it's be curious. Learn things that you're curious about, even if you think they don't apply to your career, because you would be shocked at how much closer to the end of the dock that thing is that you didn't think you needed to know. So I think just be curious, be courageous, be confident, and and your journey is not ever going to be exactly like anybody else's journey. It doesn't have to look like everybody else's journey. So don't be afraid to forge your own path, especially if it's something you're passionate about.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you so much, ladies. I again can't thank you enough. I always enjoy these conversations, and I love our last words there of advice and that idea again of accelerating that growth, of amplifying each other's voices. I think those are things that we can do, being curious and always look to learn. So thank you again. We hope everyone has a wonderful International Women's Day, and thank you.